Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a brewer that I reviewed only a single beer of theirs, and it was years ago. I think back maybe in 2019, 2020. It's been a while, and that is Browar Fortuna. This is a Polish brewer. They are based in Miłosław. That's spelled Milosław. It looks like Miloslaw in English. In Polish, it is pronounced Miłosław. Miłosław. That's where they're located in Poland. And this is Komes, which is the same name as a lot of their different beers. I'm not sure the significance of this name, but they have kind of the name and then what specifically type of beer it is and what they did to it. So this is their Baltic Porter. It clocks in at 9% ABV. And we did review another of their Baltic Porters years ago, and that was one that had like cherry and chilies and vanilla, a bunch of different additives. This is their standard Baltic Porter, which also incidentally has also won the bronze at the World Beer Cup. So quite a prestigious award. I remember liking the first beer I had from Browar Fortuna years ago, but it's been such a long time, and I saw this in my bottle shop, and I said, okay, I gotta grab this. So their standard Baltic Porter. So let's get this cracked. We are, of course, going to use our nice porter glass here today. Get this poured right in. 9% is pretty high on any porter, let alone a Baltic. They could indeed have easily have classified this as an Imperial Baltic Porter. They did not, though it would not be out of characteristic to classify it thusly. This one formed a really great head. You don't always get that on a porter port at home, but it did. So let's just check this visually. It is not pitch black, though on the camera it may well appear to be so. Holding this up to my very bright set LED lights, it is a very dark brown. I can see light through it from about the bottom inch and a half, couple inches. So it's just very, very dark brown. It is not pitch black. Formed a nice, thick, creamy head. Often don't get that on a porter. They tend to be very active in terms of carbonation and collapse them very quickly. So let's get right up on this. Oh man, yeah. Okay, there's a lot of chocolate nuance that I can smell on the nose. Sometimes you'll get these kind of fruity undertones coming out of the nose on a porter. Not on this at all. It smells very roasty, very chocolatey, with slight coffee-like suggestions. It's leaning heavily into kind of the more roasty, earthy aroma. So I'm expecting that that may be where this beer goes in terms of flavor profile. We're about to find out. Head is saddled out of the way, got a nice little pad, tons of cling. Looks like most of the quick rushing, active carbonation rushing up to the top is settled out of the way. So let's just jump right in and see what this one is about. Take one. Oh, man. Oh, that is a delicious porter. Oh, my word. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Okay, immediately, I understand how this won an award at the World Beer Cup. It is exceptionally rare that you get a porter, let alone a Baltic porter, that is this big and bold. This is a big, bold one, guys. So before we even get to the flavor profile, which is absolutely incredible, let's talk about the body and let's talk about the mouthfeel. This is 9% on a Baltic Porter. It's not a ridiculously heavy style, but this is a higher ABV range than you would see on your average. Indeed, I said you could easily classify this as an Imperial. The brewer did not, but you easily could. This feels like a very full, robust medium, kind of edging onto the border of a low, medium, heavy. So to me, it's got a lot of presence. It really feels appropriate for this much higher than average ABV range you would typically find on the Baltic Porter. In terms of the mouthfeel, typically on a porter, you're really going to feel the effervescence, the carbonation on the palate as you're moving it around. That is not the case in this one. This has indeed got a silky, fine, velvety mouthfeel. You can feel the resistance. It's a lot more resistant than a standard porter. Indeed, far more than a standard Baltic porter, but again, this is pushing 70-80% higher ABV than the norm, than your average Baltic porter. It's quite high, and it does feel appropriate. So body and mouthfeel, I would say spot on for this ABV range. It's rare to get one that's sitting at 9%, and this is a real treat. Now let's talk about the flavor profile. Okay, y'all know my opinion and my thoughts on this about porters. Porters are kind of interesting in that they are a beer style that obviously a stout is a spinoff. A stout porter is the full name of the beer style stout. We've talked about this on several videos. All stouts are porters, not all porters are stouts. This is a Baltic porter, an imperial at that. They did not call it thus. You could argue that this could be a stout porter just based on its trait characteristics and certainly the ABV. They did not, so I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not here to set out an argument, but for a typical porter, it's one of those beer styles that is trickier to do. In my humble opinion, I've had many, many great porters over the years, both Baltic and otherwise, imperial, non-imperial, additives, no additives. But porters are a beer style that can often start getting these weird, funky notes in the flavor profile, and it's got to do with the malt bill and the combination of them and how they're added at different points of the boil. If it isn't done well, you can get these weird kind of off fruity accents. It almost will start to taste like bad raisins, like raisins that have started to rot. And I don't personally like it, though it's more common than you would expect on a porter. This porter is not like that at all. This one was done extremely well, and it's really leaning heavily in these much more earthy, roasty underpinnings of the malt bill than you would find in your typical porter, and indeed certainly in a typical Baltic porter. So this is a very, very well put together beer. It's got a lot of roast. So what I was smelling on the nose with a lot of rich, kind of chocolatey, almost coffee-like undertones, that absolutely does directly translate into this glass, and it's quite intense. You don't normally get that on a porter, and you certainly don't normally get it on a Baltic porter, which is a porter variant. This is a very special beer, guys. Very special indeed. I'm going to jump back in for my second sip. I'm going to let everything re-intensify. We're going to pick apart this flavor profile again, make sure I didn't miss anything. Then we will talk about the balance and finish. But on our first sip, I 100% see why this won an award at the World Beer Cup. This is world-class Baltic Porter. Take two. That body and mouthfeel presence is insane. The instant you swallow, you do get these kind of rich, fruity accents, which would be very typical that you would pop on the front of a porter. Indeed, in a typical porter. So it's got these kind of raisin-like, prune, plum. It's dark, rich fruit, but no funky off flavors at all. And then it immediately, like within 2.5 seconds, starts to turn those flavors very deeply into the roasty edge of the malt bill. Then you just get hit with a boatload of chocolate, and it's dark chocolate, a ton of roast, and a ton of coffee undertones. This indeed, for a Baltic porter, puts me a lot more in mind of a stout counterpart than a typical porter or Baltic porter, but it starts with the classic traits you would find in a porter, but not in most stouts. So it's kind of an interesting beer. This one kind of reminds me a bit of a hybrid. But again, we're dealing with a Baltic porter that's sitting at 9% ABV, which is extremely uncommon. But from the beer drinker's perspective, it's an extremely, extremely welcome change from the norm. And how Browar Fortuna has executed this beer is absolutely top tier, guys. This is cleanly one of the best Baltic porters I have ever had. ABV notwithstanding, if I didn't even know that it won a World Beer Cup award, indeed I've had some that I disagree with the ratings, this is not one of those. I don't know what competition they went against to only pull the bronze, but this is easily one of the best Baltic porters I've ever had in my life. Not only as an interesting example of the style, but just the execution, it's absolutely top tier. So let's dig deep into the balance and the finish on this beer. The balance on this beer, as with all porters, is really the combination of the malts, what ratios, and the yeast strain. That's what's going to tell the story and the big, bold flavor picture of any porter, Baltic or otherwise. This one is very nice. You start with this classic porter underpinning, albeit quite intense and rich. It is 9% after all. And then it starts to twist almost into stout territory with where it goes in this rich, roasty underpinning direction with the malt bill. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. So flavor-wise, it almost does feel like a hybrid. And I mean that in the best possible way. It gives me all of the characteristics you would crave in a porter that is done perfectly, and then it starts to go even richer, even deeper, twisting in that kind of direction you would normally see in a stout, and it just adds to the experience for my money. And then they both commingle, so you get these rich, deep, kind of fruity accents, the plum, the kind of raisin, the deep, rich, dark fruit, the prune, and then you get into the kind of coffee, the cacao, the dark chocolate, the more roasty edge of the malt bill that you would typically find much more commonly in a stout. So this has it all, and it is absolute perfection on the balance of how they did it. It's just an interesting flavor ride. In terms of the finish, this is far longer than your average porter. Yes, it's not barrel aged. It doesn't have to be. This is 9%. It is what it is, guys. It's quite intense. The flavor intensity is immediate the second that you swallow, and it does linger long after each sip. Very full, very round, all the way to the end, and it does linger at least a minute and a half on the end of each sip. What you're left with is on the richer kind of stout-like. That's what it reminds me of notes. So you get a lot of this roast, a lot of dark chocolate, and a lot of kind of coffee notes popping out at the end. So it's just absolutely delicious, guys. This is an extremely, extremely well done Baltic Porter. Unquestionably one of the best I've ever had. I absolutely love this beer. I'm going to take my time counting my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Browar Fortuna's Komes, a Baltic porter that clocked in at 9% ABV. Browar Fortuna is based in Miłosław in Poland. This did win the bronze at the World Beer Cup, and I gotta say, immediately upon jumping into this, I fully understand why. Now, I have had a different variant of this, but I've never had the standard base Baltic porter. The last one I had years ago, I think I reviewed it maybe 2019, 2020, somewhere in that range. But I do remember really, really liking it. So finally getting to jump over to just their standard Baltic porter, yeah, just fantastic. So this was one of those beers, guys, that just checked off all the boxes across the board. Everything that I was hoping that I would get out of this beer, I got. There was a lot of interesting underpinnings that you don't often find in a Baltic porter. But again, with this higher 9% ABV, I mean, they easily could have called this Imperial Baltic Porter, and that would have been perfectly reasonable, in my opinion. And it just had so much more breadth to it across all categories. I mean, this was just a fantastic beer. And indeed, guys, we do not need to go through the scores from top to bottom. This is another beer that is in that small, illustrious category of beers that I did give a perfect 10 out of 10 in all categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, finish, head and retention, appearance, balance, my subjective thoughts, and example of style. So Browar Fortuna's Komes Baltic Porter does get a perfect 100. Guys, this is absolutely fantastic. It's been a while since I've had a porter. I happened to catch one and I said, oh yeah, I remember having a flavored variant of this. Let me grab this. Absolutely incredible. This is one I did get from a local bottle shop in my neighborhood, but I'm guessing you might be able to find this at Total Wine or any other well-stocked bottle shop if they carry a lot of good import beers. That's where I would check for this. It is well worth the hunt, guys. This is one of the best porters I ever had in my life, and I 100% understand why this won an award at the World Beer Cup. Well earned, in my opinion. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications. Hit that bell icon. It is right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.